Okay, let's have a look at how we would write our response to a paper 2 question 2 model for AQA English language. Now remember that question 2 is of course our synthesis question, where they ask you to summarize the differences. Okay, now it's almost always the differences. Sometimes it's the similarities, but it's going to work in exactly the same way. It is just synthesis. So synthesis is where you are going to take the following approach. You're going to state the difference. You're going to give your text 1 quote. You're going to give your brief inference to reaffirm that difference. Then you're going to do your text 2 quote, and you're going to do your brief inference in that second one to confirm. Okay, so say what the difference is, show it in text 1, explain it, show it in text 2, explain it, bada bing, bada boom. Let's have a look. Okay, so here is the question itself. You need to refer to both sources for this question. Refer to both sources. So you're going to quote from text 1 and you're going to quote from text 2. Okay, that's what it means when it says use details from both sources. Okay, when it says need to refer to both sources, it essentially is saying synthesize, which is where you take the two texts together. So state the difference or similarity if it is one. Okay, write a summary of the differences. So minimal depth, which is confirmed by the number of marks available, 8 marks only. So minimal depth of the differences between Robin and Jess. Okay, so the focus is the influencers in these two texts themselves. Okay, so nothing to do with the attitudes of the writers or the structure of the texts or the language choices, literally differences between the influencers as suggested by the text itself. Okay, here are the two texts. We've got one about an unlikely influencer called Robin Shuckburgh. Okay, so this is text 1, an unlikely influencer called Robin Shuckburgh, who's got a YouTube channel about him exploring the Cotswolds. And we've got a more typical influencer called Jess, who has got a little food blog, the way that she refers to it, on Instagram. Okay, so the differences that we found were the focus of the content, the publicity of the pages, the emotional response that they had, and their ages. Okay, so let's take those and let's see the quotations that we found for them. Okay, so the focus of the content: silly little porridge bowls for Jess, and where is it? All corners of the Cotswolds for Robin. Okay, so we've got the focus of the two of them. Okay, so food versus the outdoors. Easy peasy. The publicity of the page. So we've got has accumulated about 6.5 million views. That suggests that, I've got the wrong color there. That suggests that it is public, i.e. it has been seeking engagement from an audience, whereas we've got where is it? Incognito content creation suggests that it is a private page, at least in terms of her identity. Okay, so publicity. He is, in fact, probably a better quotation would be for Robin's one would actually be the Cotswold Explorer. So the channel is focused on him rather than just the Cotswolds, the Cotswold Explorer. So he is front and center, whereas she is just posting her porridge bowls themselves. Okay, the emotional response. So from my boy Robin, we have got, what is it? How does he feel about it? Extremely psychologically satisfying is how he finds the new opportunity. Whereas, oh dear, Jess makes herself cringe. So we're going to link those ones. So we're just going to label that one emotion. And then finally, the age. This is a really easy one. So already 70 years old, and then coming to Cambridge. So already 70 years old means that he is, already 70 years old. So retirement age, whereas Jess is just arrived at university, so Cambridge University, which means that she is obviously likely to be about 18, 19 years old. Okay, so she is a first year at an undergraduate degree. Okay, so we've got 4 links, we've got 4 quotations. Let's see how we can turn them into a piece of writing. Okay, so the first thing that I hope that you notice is that this is only 8 marks. Therefore, it is not an essay. Okay, it's not an essay. It is a response. Okay, so no introduction needed and no conclusion. Okay, you don't need either of those for it to work. Notice how, on the other hand, the writer has been guided through with one difference, another contrast, a third difference, and finally. Okay, so we do have some structural features, but we don't need to be turning this into a university dissertation. Okay, really, really simply, we're just linking them. Then I'm just going to color code this response to make it really, really clear what the writer has done. Okay, so the difference is their focus, and notice how it gets clarified. So the difference between them, okay, with Robin focusing on the outdoors, his channel page being, okay, so with Robin focusing on the outdoors, Jess focusing on meals, okay, so this is me stating the difference. Then I've got my quotations, so the Cotswold Explorer and foodie alter ego on Instagram, okay. Then we have really, really simple, low-level, basic, suggesting natural world thrills, implying her plates are her centerpieces, okay. So we state the difference, that's in green. One difference between them is what they focus on, with Robin focusing on the outdoors, Jess focusing on meals. We have our evidence, his channel page being the Cotswold Explorer. Let me just shift where I've got my highlighting there. His channel page being the Cotswold Explorer, her foodie alter ego on Instagram. And then we have really, really low-level basic insight suggesting natural world thrills. Okay, so the Cotswold Explorer. And foodie alter ego implying her plates are her centerpieces. Okay, now I've done the exact same thing for the other 3 sentences of my analysis. Okay, so another contrast is how attached they feel to their public-facing role. Okay, with Robin owning the word, whilst Jess remains blah blah blah. Okay, not herself. Then we've got our evidence. Okay, influencer and naming the channel after himself, the Cotswold Explorer, and then incognito and only publishing her silly little porridge bowls. And then we've got our insight, very, very basic. These 2 things suggest pride. So influencer and naming the channel after himself suggests pride, and going incognito and only showing the porridge bowls, not her face, suggests she prefers to keep separate from it all. Easy peasy. Same exact approach for the third sentence. A third difference, didn't need to zoom in there. A third difference between them is the emotions they associate with their work. Okay. So we've got Robin and we've got Jess. Then we've got our quotations. Extremely psychologically satisfying and making herself cringe. And then we've got our very basic insight. So extremely psychologically satisfying, giving the impression of joy, and making yourself cringe, giving the impression of shyness or even shame. And then finally, the exact same approach for a final outing. Most obvious way they differ is in terms of age. Okay, and then we've got Robin and Jess. Okay, and then we've got our evidence. Robin's in his 70s, and Jess is coming to Cambridge. There's our quotes. And then we get our little bit of insight, suggesting relative old age, making him unlikely as an influencer, and coming to Cambridge, suggesting she's of early university age or about 18 to 19 years old, a more traditional influencer age. Okay, so I've gone very slightly further in this final one, where I go a more traditional influencer age and linking the making him an unlikely influencer. You don't actually have to do that. That's an extra step further. But if I was worrying that I hadn't said enough about my texts, I might have just slotted that in there. Either way, it's 8 out of 8. Easy peasy. Should only take you 8 minutes to do. And that's the approach that we would take. All right.